Everyone. My name is Phil Vassel, and I'm the artistic director of the Sauga Music Conference. And this is the final day of 2 weeks of, conversations, discussions, and interactions dealing with some of the more pressing issues during the pandemic. And we've dealt with everything from live streaming on social media networks to digital marketing to access and funding and a number of other things like how to record at home in your studio. So, as well as overcoming some of the obstacles that BIPOCs face from time to time in the music industry here in Canada. Now we have a keynote address by Alex Kresovich, and Alex is someone that we were really looking forward to hearing from. He is the Roy H. Park Fellow and PhD student in the UNC's Hussman School of Journalism and Media. His work focuses on the influence of popular music, which references anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts on adolescence, mental health attitudes, and behaviors. And his research is published in the esteemed JAMA Pediatrics, the Journal of Health Communication. But that's only one part of Alex's life. In addition to his research and teaching work, Alex is a RIAA Platinum certified and Billboard #1 music producer who has collaborated with Panic at the Disco, CeeLo Green, X Ambassadors, Nikki Heaton, Max, Hootie Allen, Snow That Product, Chris Webby, and Jocelyn Alice. That's not all. He also
No,
serves
it's
as
not.
partner and chief marketing officer for the Cut Buddy. The Cut Buddy is a beard and haircut grooming company founded by Joshua Esnard that appeared on the ABC TV show Shark Tank in November 2017. So this man has worn many hats. He's lived many different lives. And before introducing him, let me just pause for a moment and thank our sponsors, namely Factor and also Department of Canadian Heritage and the Irie Music Festivals for supporting this initiative. We thank them for making this possible. We've done this on Zoom now for 2 weeks, and over time have become much more comfortable. And we can have Alex sit at his home or in his office, wherever he's comfortable to do this. So without further ado, please help me welcome Alex Kresovich, Roy Park Fellow and PhD student from UNC Hussman School of Journalism. Alex.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here. Thank you to the Sauga City Music Fest. It's really cool to be able to speak with you about my research, and I'm just very thankful to you. So thank you to you and Donna and everyone involved in putting this together. It's a pleasure. So I guess without further ado, I know I'm here, so let me get to some interesting research for everyone. So I'm going to share my screen. Share. So let's do play from the start. So I'm hoping everyone can see this. Phil, are we good? Can you see?
Yes.
Okay, great. So my presentation today is called 808s and Chart Place. Popular rap is opening up about mental health. I hope everyone appreciates the title. When I tried to use this title for an academic paper, my professor said that's too cute and no one's going to get the reference to Kanye's album. So I'm using it here. So let's get to it. So who I am today is, so I'm Alex Kresovich again. I'm a Roy H. Park Fellow, a PhD student here at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And essentially, the quote, as you said, Phil, very well, like I study the influence of popular music, which references anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts on US youth, mental health attitudes and behaviors. But who I am today is really informed by who I was. And who I was, as Phil said as well, a music producer. From about 2012 to 2018, I worked on music full time for a good portion of that time, I was in Los Angeles, and I was lucky enough to work hard enough and have the success of becoming a platinum music producer and work on a Billboard #1. Phil kind of ran through the credits. Those pictures, over in the corners, myself and my wonderful friend and manager, Joshua Esnard, when we got that platinum plaque, actually just 2 weeks ago, I think. Then myself and Lenny S to the right there. He's Jay-Z's right-hand man. That's us at Rock Nation. Bottom left, I don't know if I have the right audience for this because it's Canada, and I know a lot of people might feel a way about Pusha T against Drake, but myself and Pusha T got to work with good music a little bit, and myself with a wonderful producer, Bongo, who's really killing it, and I feel like I look like the palest person of all time because he put it in black and white. So yes, I was a music producer for a long time before I got to grad school, and I was talking with my dad before I came here, and he was like, you should speak truth to power and be honest about, why you aren't doing that anymore. So I know that some people in the audience, Phil, as you said, would be some artists or music industry type. So I wanted to just talk about kind of my decisions and maybe preach to the choir in some things and just kind of elaborate on how I got to exactly doing the research that I'm doing now. So really why I left the music business, I guess if we're going to be casual about it, was first and foremost, it was too far from my family and friends. I lived in Los Angeles, but I grew up in Ithaca, New York, which is actually not too far from Toronto. It's about as far away as from New York City. So I'm from a similarly cold place. Thankfully, I'm in North Carolina now. It's a little warmer, but I was 3 time zones away from everyone I knew. And for those in the industry, you also know it can be a very unstable work environment. I can say day to day how much I appreciate having health insurance and not being a contractor for all these record labels and all that good stuff. And 1 month feeling like the richest person of all time, and then the next 6 months feeling like I make no money and I'm broke. So, that was a big reason I left. It was really hard on my mental health. I really struggled. So I have generalized anxiety disorder, which is an anxiety disorder where just kind of like excessive worry and stuff, just kind of that's generally just how I'm wired. And when I was in Los Angeles, like the music industry, every stereotype, you hear is true. And it was really hard on me. I was certainly depressed for a really long time out there. So it was really hard on my mental health. And again, the music business, not to crap on everyone in the music business, because there's so many wonderful artists and label people and everyone, but it's like, it can be really awful. Canceled meetings. I don't know how many of you, again, if there are artists out there, maybe you've experienced this sitting in a record label's office. Like you drove an hour to be at this meeting because LA traffic, everything's like an hour. And you're sitting there and your meeting they're like, oh, your meeting's been canceled. And then you see they're like, the person who you're supposed to meet with isn't in today. And you're like getting up to leave and you see them walk by and you're like, oh, okay, that's not really true at all. The lies, it's a really tough business. And if I could tell you all, like, if I got every big song or every first single that I was promised, oh man, I'd be wearing a gold jacket right now or something. I'd be feeling a little different. The desperation, it's Los Angeles and the music industry in general is a really, it can be a cruel beast in a lot of ways. And there's certainly often a lot more talent than there is opportunity. So that can be really hard. And then if I could tell you all how many times I got asked if I could make a beat like DJ Mustard, it makes me want to scream every time I hear that. So just to give you an idea about kind of why I left, because I do get asked about that a lot. But something I noticed when I was in Los Angeles was that these younger artists I was working with, so I was mostly doing rap and pop production, probably about 50-50. I'm a diehard rap fan. I grew up being a rap fan since a little kid. I remember calling stores ahead of time, trying to get like Puff Daddy and the Family's No Way Out album. I don't know if you remember that one, Phil, but that was a favorite one of mine early on for sure. And something I noticed when I was working with these young artists out in Los Angeles was they were really rapping and singing about mental health a lot. And I was like, that's strange. That's definitely not how it used to be when I was growing up. And they were really comfortable about it. And they would, rap or sing about dealing with anxiety or depression or suicidal thoughts. And I was like, that was just something I noticed. I was like, that's really not how music used to be. And as someone who struggles with their mental health and as someone who's really sensitive about it, I was really kind of tuned into that. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And for me, it was certainly really relatable. I always enjoyed, people being vulnerable in that way. My favorite artists, were very vulnerable in that way. Joe Budden and Kid Cudi and Kanye West. And we'll kind of get into this a little bit, but that was something I really tuned into. So again, I decide I'm going to UNC, but I haven't figured out what my research is going to be. So in the 1990s in 3rd grade, I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. I wrote 1990s, so as to not date myself. I'm 34, I guess I'll just put it out there, but old enough to remember the 90s. And it was something where being diagnosed with it, I certainly didn't understand it, but I started to understand that just excessively worried. And I would try to relate it to some friends of mine. And one friend in particular I remember growing up with, he's a young Black man from a Caribbean background. And he would be like, I remember telling him like, oh, I go to therapy, or I'm struggling with anxiety. And he would be like, why? He's like, just toughen up. Like, just don't worry about it. Just don't think about those things. And I totally understood where he's coming from, because if you haven't experienced it personally, it's something new and something different. So I say that to say, back then, I remember telling him and telling other young people then that, I was struggling with anxiety or would go to therapy, and they didn't understand. So fast forward, the summer of 2018, I'm getting ready to go to UNC, this program for my PhD, and I haven't really decided what I'm going to do my research on exactly. I knew I wanted to do health communication, something. And so I was riding on this back road with this same friend. We've stayed friends for 20 years. And I just picked that picture as a stock picture. It's not the road we were on, but paints the picture. I'm trying to tell a story. So we're riding on this road, and again, he's a young Black man with Caribbean heritage, and we're listening to Kodak Black at the time. I remember it clear as day. And we're listening to the song called Tunnel Vision, and he really liked Kodak Black. He had lived in Florida for a bit, and he was saying, I remember him saying, like, I was like, what do you think the song's about and stuff? We just like music. It was just the way we bonded. And he's like, I really like it. It just really speaks to me. And it really just, I just really relate to it. And it's like, I really relate to what Kodak's talking about. And I started listening to it. And really what the song is about, for those of you who don't know, is a song about really being a young Black man in America, and really having to deal with, the systematic oppression, where it's like the systems, his kind of point is like the system set up to either have you end up in prison or dead. And you have to have this tunnel vision. You have to stay focused so that, you don't end up in these outcomes that are kind of designed for you. So I remember my friend just kind of saying, it's like, yeah, I think I have anxiety, and I think I'm going to go to therapy. And my reaction was, excuse me? Like, this was the same friend that 20 years ago was kind of saying, just toughen up. Mental health's not a real thing. And I was like, wait, so did he realize that mental health was kind of something to him, or he kind of found his way through listening to music and kind of identifying himself through that and identifying this thing, and it made him more comfortable in speaking about it? So the research kind of began. So I started at UNC that fall, and I went to my faculty advisor and who I was working with at the time, who are now my dissertation co-chairs. Shout out to them. I just like to shout them out. Seth, Nora, and Francesca Dillman Carpentier. And they were like, I brought them this idea. I was like, I think like music has really changed. Like popular music has really changed. And, there's much more discussion of mental health, especially in rap music. And I was like, do you guys think I could, do research on this? I'm just starting grad school. I do not know what I'm doing. And they were each like, well, look into the literature, look at like the academic papers and stuff, and see if anyone's kind of looking at this specifically. And I looked it up, and again, there's great music research being done. There's great mental health research being done. There's great music and mental health research being done, but it didn't seem to me that anyone had really started tapping into looking at this thing happening in popular music that, again, most people who are diehard fans of music already saw was happening, where it's like all these artists are really starting to talk about struggling with mental health and what that impact might be on people, like young people, like my friend or whoever. So I said, I think this thing's happening. And they said, well, don't tell us, show us. Like, it's science. I got to show them this thing's happening. So I created these slides to kind of try to illustrate this phenomenon that I feel like was happening in music. So mental health has often been this stigmatized topic. It's taboo. People aren't comfortable talking about it. I love this Jay-Z quote where in 2010, he was talking about his recording process. And he's like, it's really like therapy sessions. That's why I do it in the studio. I'm not a person who will sit and talk about my feelings, but the music just pulls it out. And it's like, man, I've held that in for 12 years. And I was like, that's kind of how the attitude has been. It's like, I don't really want to sit and talk about my feelings. Music helps, but I'm not here to talk about my mental health. But things are really changing. And there are a lot of modern examples of the biggest artists in rap music right now are really opening up about mental health. We have Kanye West talking about, being diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Lil Baby has his song Emotionally Scarred that he performed at the 2020 AMAs. Kendrick Lamar's music being used to raise mental health awareness. Down in the bottom left there's a tweet from DaBaby right after his older brother unfortunately took his own life, where he had struggled with depression and post-traumatic stress disorder for a long time, advocating for mental health. J. Cole talking about depression, Big Sean, the list goes on and on and on. And I'm like, this is not how it used to be. This is really a change. So what was once taboo, as we call it, is no longer taboo. You know, here's a great article that I always love from DJ Booth. Jay-Z gives therapy a major cosign. I grew so much from the experience. And a really important quote I pulled from that article was Jay-Z saying, music has always been my therapy, kind of as he is talking about in 2010. But I've been doing therapy for about 4 years now. A lot of people go through trauma and are too embarrassed to get help. People really have to take care of themselves. I was like, that's it. I was like, this is changing. So what are the implications of this? And I guess I need to show these scientists in the science world, hey, this thing's happening. So that led me to my first study, which Phil brought up in the introduction, that was published in JAMA Pediatrics last fall. It's a medical journal, so it was really exciting to get in there. So I did this study of popular rap music lyrics, where we analyzed lyrics in the most popular rap songs in the US. We compared the top 25 songs from different kind of year segments, so like every 5 years, and we did from 1998, which was the first year that rap music became the top selling genre in the US, up until 2018, which was the time when I decided to do the study. And it was just kind of, it ended up being a nice 20-year space there. And what was I going to say about 2018? Oh, and 2018 was the year that it was quote unquote officially announced that like rap music was now the biggest genre in the United States. I think any diehard rap fan or anyone really paying attention to music in the US knows it had been it owned the last decade, but 2018 is when they said it. So we'll count it as that. So we looked at the most popular songs from essentially 1998 to 2018 in snapshots to kind of look at how things might change. Again, it was published in JAMA Pediatrics in December of that year, last year, just a couple months ago. And we analyzed the lyrics of the top 25 songs in each of these annual segments, 125 songs total, for references to anxiety, or what we call anxious thinking, depression or depressive thinking, suicidal thinking, and then what we call mental health metaphors. And what we mean by that is, it's not often, as any good rap fan will know, that an artist will be like, hey, I'm really anxious. That's just not how we tend to talk about anxiety in music, and certainly not in rap music. But artists would often say things like, I feel like I'm losing my mind. I feel like I need to be put in a straitjacket. I feel like I'm being pushed to the edge. And to scientifically study this, you can't say, oh, I think that's personally probably anxiety, but you can't really say that scientifically and justify it, because it could be something else. We aren't sure. It could be PTSD. It could be tied to bipolar disorder. It could be a lot of different things, but we thought it was still important to capture that there were these mental health metaphors. There were these things that artists are saying in songs that are alluding to, that are like hinting at the fact that they're struggling with their mental health without specifically saying, I have anxiety or I have depression. And then we looked at stressors tied to them. So what I mean by stressors is, we looked at if an artist is implying that they're struggling with depression, what's the stressor related to that depression? So for example, it would be, are they talking about their love life? Are they talking about their day-to-day life? Are they talking about like systematic oppression? Are they talking about police authority? We wanted to look at what the relationships were to these mental health references. So some lyric examples would be, so for anxiety, again, not many of these, but a Ja Rule song from 2003, Mesmerized, which was really big. What's taking so long? I'm getting anxious. So we're like, ding, there's, a reference to anxiety. Depression, Kanye West on a song I love, Click, went through deep depression when my mama passed. These are kind of the most obvious ones. Suicide, XXXTentacion, who unfortunately passed away, very recently, on his song Sad. He really talked a lot about mental health, and he said, suicide if you ever try to let go. Then for a mental health metaphor, I highlight Drake from, I think it's JB Blockboy's song Look Alive, where he said, push me to the edge so it ain't my MFing fault. Like, pushed me to the edge, like feeling like I'm kind of at the edge. It's it's highlighting this kind of mental health stress that he's feeling without saying specifically what it was. So myself and one other student at UNC, a shout out to Meredith Refner Collins, a wonderful friend of mine as well. We analyzed all 125 songs, looking systematically through the lyrics without the music or anything, just looking at the words and looking for these references. And what we found was really interesting. So first and foremost, for all these kind of categories combined, we looked at what you see here is kind of like a chart showing the percentage of the top 25 songs in each of these years that had a mental health, some sort of mental health reference. So you can see in 1998, about a third of them do. And by the time we get to 2018, it's over doubled, and over 2/3 of the songs have some sort of reference to struggling with mental health in some way. And what's really exciting for this presentation actually is I get to include cool things like this next slide, which was left on the cutting room floor. We did not get to publish this in the study when it came out, just because you have so much space in a study. So it's like making a movie and some scenes have to get cut. This one, unfortunately, just had to get cut. But we also looked at lyrics in what we call the most memorable sections. So those first 4 lines of the song, the last 4 lines of the song, and the chorus. And we also paid particular attention to those because that's, the most, again, memorable part of the song. That's what people are really going to take away from it. And what's really interesting, you can look here, it's like starting in 1998, only 2 of the songs out of the 25 and in 2003 had any sort of mental health reference. By the time we get to 2018, it's 4 out of 10 of them did. This is becoming more and more common. So again, I talked about anxiety, and this was what we found. There was really no increase in anxiety or these kind of easy to assess and kind of analyze, see in the lyrics references to anxiety. It seemed to be pretty flat. But I'll kind of get back to why I think that was. We'll get to that actually very shortly. As far as depression went up, what they call significantly, went up in a very meaningful way. So you kind of see pretty flat from 1998 to 2008. And then between 2008 and 2013, there was kind of this huge jump where it more than doubled, and it kind of stayed up there. And interestingly, you start seeing that with suicide as well. And while this doesn't look like a huge jump right here, what made this really important was it's not the biggest jump. It's a 12% between the beginning and the end. But at the beginning, we're talking about 0. There were 0 songs in the top 25 most popular rap songs in 1998 and 2003 that had any reference to suicidal thinking or having suicidal thoughts. By the time we're in 2013 and 2018, numerous songs are referencing it. So it's there is, it does appear that there's a trend forming. And then most interestingly, these mental health metaphors. So again, early on, you're not seeing much, not much discussion of that. And by the time we get to, it's 8% of those songs. By the time we get to 2018, basically half the songs that we analyzed from 2018 have some sort of reference to mental health, having a mental health difficulty. And it was just really surprising. And I personally think that this graph here kind of accounts for anxiety, because as I was saying earlier, I don't think a lot of artists are really, I think there's still a lot of stigma, especially in young men and young men of color, to expressing struggling with anxiety. It's not seen as a macho thing to be struggling with. It's seen as, it's you want to be tough. You don't want to be seen as someone who's nervous. That's seen as a weakness. That's seen as something someone could prey on. So while they wouldn't say, I'm struggling with anxiety, they could say, I'm losing my mind. I feel like I'm breaking down. There's different ways to talk about this. So that is what we saw with those categories. And then as far as the stressors go, don't even worry about the numbers here. It was just kind of the easiest way to show what we actually found. The 2 categories that were most linked to these mental health references in songs were what we called environmental conditions, which was kind of the day-to-day living, just, it could be systematic racism. It could just be just day-to-day life. Being an artist, it's just can be really stressful, different than being work life or family life or authority or friends or other people. And then love life. I think of artists like Juice WRLD a lot, who, really got famous off his song Lucid Dreams, which was all about, kind of a relationship falling apart and his depression. And I think a lot of metaphors, I don't think there's suicidal thinking in that, but the XXXTentacion song was certainly about suicidal thinking and depression related to his love life. So those 2 categories were what really were associated with these rise in mental health in songs. So the question is, what do these results really mean? So again, I love DJ Booth. They have some good art and some great articles, and shout out to Brian Zisuk over there. They do wonderful work. And from Lil Uzi Vert to Future, rap's biggest stars are depressed and so are their fans. So what these results mean is now we have some scientific evidence that popular rap songs are referencing mental health difficulties more than before. And that's important because if we're hoping to try to study this and utilize it, the first step is even showing that this is happening. So I think that's why the journal was pretty excited about it. The study, I'm very thankful, got a fair amount of media coverage. And I think it's because it was the first scientific evidence. Don't get me wrong. Other people have seen this before. There's some great things written about it. The Rap Therapy show I think it's on Vice, is a wonderful show where they have young artists of color talking about, their experiences. But this was the first time that we had seen, we'd scientifically studied the music lyrics and looking at it in that way. The other thing is that this increase happened at the same time as a dramatic increase in the suicide rate of US youth. The suicide rate pre-pandemic, I'm afraid to see probably what it looks like now, but the year before the pandemic, it had risen to its highest rate since 1960. And that was also including special increases among young and Black and African-American men and just general youth overall. The adolescent suicide rate was, again, at its highest rate since 1960. And when you think about that, that matters because, a lot of the rap music audience, again, it is a Black and African-American musical medium, but now it's the king of music in America. So youth are the main consumers of music. So that's why it mattered to look at it with youth more broadly as well. And again, so we're seeing this increase in references to mental health struggles, and we're seeing this increase that it's at the same time as this increase in suicide rate of youth and young Black and African-American men. And unfortunately, it's kind of unclear which trend came first. I get asked about that a lot. It's really hard to tell. There's a lot of things that go into it. It's kind of a chicken and egg thing where it's really hard to say one influenced the other. Did young people hear these songs and start, taking their own life or struggling with mental health more? Maybe not, we don't know. Or were these artists just describing this worsening mental health trends around them? That could be as well, but it's pretty unclear. So how do I interpret the results? So one thing that I noted in the study was that a big increase happened between 2008 and 2013. And again, credit to the title of this presentation, what I wanted to name the study, 808s and Heartbreaks came out in 2008. And that was a really important album at the time. For those of you who don't know what it is, so 808s and Heartbreaks was an album by Kanye West, that's the cover right there, that came out in 2008. It was his fourth album. He was kind of at really the peak of his powers at the time. He had 3 commercially incredibly successful albums. He is a global superstar, and he kind of had this format he was going on. And after that third album, unfortunately, his mother passed away, surprisingly, and his fiance at the time, they broke it off. They had a long-time relationship, and he was really struggling with depression. And he put out this album which sounded nothing like anything he had made before, really much that we had heard in rap before, at least in mainstream rap. Kid Cudi had started getting there, and it's worth noting he wrote with Kanye on the album. He helped him write a lot of the songs. But it was just this very different thing. It was much more melodic. And the big thing is it was very, very vulnerable, especially as a young man of color. It was very, very vulnerable on a very large stage. Kanye was a superstar, and it was kind of widely panned and kind of, I'll be honest, myself at first, I didn't like it that much. Then I went through Heartbreak in the Future and I started to get it. But at the time, I didn't really understand it. And now it's really worth noting that Rolling Stone recently called it one of the 40 most influential albums of all time. And in terms of the last kind of segment of data we looked at, these songs from 2018, of the most popular songs in there, we're talking about Drake, Juice WRLD, Post Malone, who else was in there? I think maybe XXXTentacion. They had all referenced this specific album as being incredibly influential to their style. It's also worth noting that at this same time, between that time window, between 2008 and 2013, we of course had the recession, which disproportionately affected young people of color, or people of color in general. So it's worth noting that. But in terms of the music, that really seemed to be a touch point. And then I think back to that 2018 study, I was like, okay, so I think there is potential. When I think back to my friend in the car, there is potential that these songs are normalizing mental health and opening up the conversation. It's helping people talk about it. They see Kanye West as this role model. And if he's talking about it, maybe I can talk about it too. It's not something that I need to be, as ashamed of. He was really role modeling kind of courage and vulnerability about a very sensitive topic. And I don't think he was doing it necessarily to do that inherently, but that's how it works when you're a role model on that level. So moving forward from that study, it was kind of like, all right, well, what do we need to know? Is this a good thing? Is it a good thing that these, lyrics are, that there are more songs describing mental health? Is it a bad thing? There's potential, it could be opening up conversations, or it could be leading young people to think that, suffering from depression is cool, or all these things, when it's a role model, it can happen. And then we've analyzed the lyrics now. So like, how do these songs influence young people? Well, I'm really glad I asked, because, sorry, that's a bad joke. So anyways, the next study I did, building upon this, was I looked at the influence of these mental health themed songs on US college students. So I did a study, which was a survey of 253 college students at a large Southeastern university, which if you look to the top right of the slide, you could guess what I'm talking about. And it is super important to note scientifically, that it was mostly white females. It just so happens that the college I'm in, most of the undergrads are white females. So it's an important consideration. I'm not really going to bring it back too much, but there are limitations. There were not a lot of people of color taking this necessarily, and the results could be different. But I just want to point out that while we did have, a good amount of people taking the survey, it might not be representative, or it's probably not representative of college students in full necessarily. But what I did in the survey was I asked about young people's familiarity with these contemporary pop music songs with mental health themes, how they feel connected to the song or to the song's artist, and how that connection influences their mental health attitudes and behaviors. So I picked 5 songs in general that I felt like were contemporary and really big songs that kind of represented this. So this is where it starts being kind of rap and pop music, because I'm just trying to look at what are the big songs that young people are really listening to. So I have the 5 songs here. They're ranked, not ranked, but they're listed in order of kind of the ones that the people who took the survey were most familiar with. So there's Breathin' by Ariana Grande, which is a song where she's essentially advocating for, breathing when you're having kind of an anxiety attack. It's a song about dealing with anxiety. Then there's 1-800-273-8255 by Logic, which for those of you who don't know, that's the phone number for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. That song goes through the story of a young person who is thinking of taking their own life and calls the number and kind of talks themselves, or not, is kind of talked out of it, and they see value again. In My Blood by Shawn Mendes, another song about anxiety. EXO Tour Life by Lil Uzi Vert, which is a song where he's talking about just really dealing with depression and really struggling with a relationship. And then Lovely by Billie Eilish and Khalid, which was really a song just about struggling with mental health in general. So what was really exciting to me, at the bottom, you can see there, only 3 people out of the 253 people who took this survey were unfamiliar with all 5 songs. So it's like, oh, again, at least among these people who took this survey, these songs are, they're, young people are really around these songs. It's not like we're just hearing that, oh yeah, young people listen to these. It's like, no, it's clear they know these songs. So what was really, really interesting about the findings was, so again, I looked at I asked young people how they related to these songs and how they related to the artist. So in terms of the songs, it's this thing called perceived personal connection. Did they feel like they related to the song? Did they feel like that spoke to them? The more that they felt like the song spoke to them, the more they felt mental health empathy. They felt, empathy. They felt like, they felt bad for other people who struggle with their mental health. Not in a bad way, like looking down on them, but they felt like, man, that really stinks. And I really feel for them. Like they could kind of relate to them. So the more the young people connected to these songs, the more they felt like they could understand other people who struggle with their mental health. And that mental health empathy was kind of like a key towards getting towards these young people feeling or having less mental health stigma overall. More support for public mental health resources. They were more like, hey, we should have more public mental health resources. It did not, the reason this is in red, it did not encourage them personally to seek mental health treatment, which I'll get to shortly, why on that. But it did encourage them to support others. So they would hear these songs, and again, these are just associations. It's not cause and proof and stuff, but they're related in a really interesting way. And what was really interesting too was that if you just tried to look directly from feeling connected to the songs to these outcomes, it didn't work. That empathy was the critical key in what these songs were fostering in people. And through that empathy, you're getting to some of those really exciting outcomes. And again, the same thing here. So what we call parasocial relationship. It's like feeling like the artist is your friend. The more you feel connected to this artist, I certainly have this. Kanye's problematic now. I hate that I always have to say it, but Kanye was my favorite artist growing up. So I feel like when Kanye's doing great, makes me happy. When he wins a Grammy, I'm happy. When his mother passes away, I'm sad for him. I feel like he's my friend, which is a relationship a lot of us share with our favorite musical artists, especially when we're younger. It's like you really feel like you kind of know them in a way and they understand you in an intimate way. So again, the exact same thing. The more these young people felt connected to the artist, the more they had that empathy and the exact same outcomes. Less mental health stigma, more support for public resources, and more willingness to support others, although not so much renewed willingness to seek treatment themselves. And again, empathy was the key there. So what do these results mean? Essentially, feeling connected to these mental health themed pop songs or rap songs and the artists that perform them was associated with these young people having more mental health empathy. We can't say for sure that they cause it yet, just based on a survey, but that mental health empathy was associated with really important positive mental health attitudes and behaviors. And what was interesting, where I didn't see any relationship based on the data that listening to these songs or feeling connected to these artists or their songs was associated with seeking help for themselves. It was because we asked some other questions, and young people reported that when they're really struggling with their mental health, they didn't feel the need to go get help because they would put on their favorite music to help them improve their mood. So it was this really interesting thing where it's like music stayed involved in this no matter what. And it wasn't that these people didn't want to seek help. And there are many reasons for that. It could be, having access to healthcare, having the right insurance. Like there are just so many reasons why that could be. But so when they're struggling with their mental health, no, they aren't going to a therapist. No, they aren't going to a psychologist. They aren't going to a doctor. They're going back to their music. That's what is there for them. So how do I interpret these results? I really felt like this study kind of showed we're at the tip of the iceberg. This research is just starting to tap into the potential influence of these popular songs and artists who are talking about mental health. And these artists may be particularly effective as mental health advocates used to promote positive mental health attitudes and behaviors among young people. The more they feel connected, they relate to these songs and they feel connected to these artists. Like that's a very special bond that young people have and continue to have. I know I certainly feel with many of my favorite artists, older and new, and that could be something very important to tap into in the future in terms of trying to promote these positive behaviors. So the question I had from this was like kind of what we need to know is, given these results, do we know if the actual influence comes from the song itself? So that led me to the third study I'm going to talk about real quick. I did this experimental test of a mental health themed pop song on US college students. So I did a pop song, not a rap song. I'll explain why shortly. So again, an experimental questionnaire at a large Southeastern university. Again, you all can guess where. And again, it's worth noting, again, a limitation, and it's the reason more research needs to be done here, but we're starting to tap into this stuff. It was mostly white females who took it, and there were 303 participants. So the design works like this. I wanted to see if listening to a popular song or a pop song that was talking about struggling with mental health would lead to more mental health empathy or help with stigma as well. But the thing is, in doing an experiment, you don't want to tell people that's what you're looking for before you're doing it, because then they might answer the question in a way that they feel like you want them to answer. So I did what I called it a lyric video study. So I created lyric videos for this song. And so the people who took the survey would see the lyrics, and I was like, I want to know what makes the lyric video the most memorable? What aspects of it? And again, this is complete BS. I did not care about that stuff at all. What I wanted to do was have them listen to a pop song about mental health and see how that made them feel. So I worked with, again, a big time thank you to a pop singer, songwriter, producer, Sophie Rose, to create the experiment. So I worked with her for a few reasons. The main one being that we used her song Break Up With Myself. That's her single art for it. And it was because she was someone I knew. And to do an experiment, everything needs to be the same except the one thing you're trying to look at. So my idea on this experiment was to say, I think that the lyrics really matter. So we created these we created a lyric video for her song. So what we did in working with her, and she was so phenomenal about helping with this, was we created 3 different songs. So she had this song, Break Up With Myself. I didn't ask her to make it. I didn't want it to be inauthentic in describing her own mental health difficulties. So this was just a song she put out on her own. I just happened to know her. And I had this song idea, or this experiment idea, and I was taking an experiment class here at UNC. It's like, this would be really cool. So we have Break Up With Myself, a mental health song. She created a completely alternative song where she sang the song in the exact same melodies. The beat is the same. Everything is the exact same. The only difference is the words in the song. And she created this song called I Can Make You Mine, which was just about a relationship, but it was written in a way that it wasn't about like struggling with the anxiety of the relationship. It was just like kind of like having a crush or something. So, and we even tested for that to make sure that people didn't think that it was about anxiety or mental health as well. So she created that. And then to kind of look at it and say, like, I'm trying to say the lyrics in these mental health songs are what really make a big difference with young people. We had people listen to like just the beat as well, to see, just kind of to be able to compare these 3 different songs. So what I measured again was that feeling connected to the song, just not the artist so much, but I was like, how much do you relate to this song? Then that mental health empathy, which looked to be so critical in that last study, and then mental health stigma. So again, here are a lot of numbers. I'm going to walk you through it in a simple way. First and foremost, people connected to the songs that had lyrics. So it showed, or at least suggested, that lyrics are the main key for how people are connecting to these songs. Again, this isn't some groundbreaking finding necessarily that lyrics matter in songs, or that's how people find the story of the song or take things away from the song. But in terms of, again, without getting too deep in the weeds, I'm looking at a specific theory that I don't need to, explain too much. It's just that feeling connected to the song. It showed that lyrics were that way. And with mental health empathy, boom, the Breakup With Myself song created significantly higher empathy than these other conditions. It was like a very, very meaningful difference. So it looks like listening to a pop song once could do that. Unfortunately, there were no differences really between the different levels of stigma for their peers who struggle with anxiety, depression, or suicidal thinking. Those ended up actually being explained by the people who took the experiment, their personal mental health experience. If they had personal mental health experience, they had much less stigma than the people who had not had previous mental health experience, which makes sense, but it's helpful to be able to explain it in that way. So what do these results mean? Again, we have scientific evidence that lyrics are how young people connect to these mental health themed pop songs. Most importantly, listening once to a pop song about mental health difficulties caused these college students to feel more mental health empathy for their peers. So instead of the survey where you're just asking hey, do you know these songs? Do you feel connected to them? And how much mental empathy do you feel? Now we're comparing these groups where it's like, we're asking about how this song, the empathy they feel from this song, and the people who listen to the song with mental health were like, they had way more mental health empathy than the people who did not, who listened to either of the other versions. And listening once to a pop song about mental health had no impact on mental health stigma. And that's really important to note too. Again, as a researcher, it's not always great when your results don't work out how you want, but it's still important and it can tell you something. So how do I interpret these results? First and foremost, a mental health themed pop song can influence young people's mental health empathy on just one listen. That's really important, especially because most young people aren't listening to these songs, these really famous songs, just one time. But this does show that there's potential that even just one listen can do that. And on top of that, the performer artist might not even have to be a celebrity to have that kind of impact. Sophie Rose is a wonderful, incredibly talented singer-songwriter, and within music circles, she is very well known. But to the greater public, she is not very well known yet. I'm rooting for her to be, for sure, but she's not there yet. But using her kind of showed that the performing artist doesn't necessarily need to be a celebrity. And I guess, with stigma, I didn't see what I wanted, or what I thought might happen didn't. But it just may be that you need to listen more than once to one of these songs to have less stigma, or maybe it's a celebrity artist and the fact that their role model is playing some role here in kind of introducing or helping people feel less mental health stigma, as we saw in the survey. So there's some questions about that. So what do we need to know from here is does celebrity status matter if we're trying to affect stigma? Does more listening help? What if it's a rap song? Again, I'm just a student in my program now. I have not had an opportunity to try this experiment with a rap song. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to, hopefully in the near future, just not yet, but that's something. And if anyone out there is a researcher and wants to do this, please go ahead, because I would love to see how this looks through a rap lens. So kind of an overview of this work and kind of the work I'm doing. So why this work matters. Again, the youth suicide rate in the United States, and I unfortunately cannot speak to Canada, but in the US where my research is looking, is at its highest point since 1960. And this was pre-COVID. So we're in the middle of this mental health epidemic, which I feel like Phil has been kind of alluding to and talking about probably in other talks here and other webinars, that we're in this really important mental health moment just in the world, not just the United States. It's also important to note that young people are listening to music more than ever before. According to Nielsen, it's about 40 hours a week now. It's almost like a full-time job of listening to music. And there are a lot of reasons for that. Most of it's technology. There's Bluetooth speakers, and you can listen on your iPhone, and streaming services. And everywhere's got Wi-Fi, or you got 5G, or whatever. So it's really that young people are really listening to music a lot more. So it really matters. And youth listening to these songs with mental health really matters, because it's a really impressionable time. So research shows that young people use music, popular music, or just music generally speaking, for three main reasons. They use it to kind of change their mood, to feel better, like to be able to have a sense of being able to control their own mood. They use it to try to find their way in the world, what we call identity processes. And what that means is like to try to figure out who they are. They listen to music and kind of hear their own stories. You listen to a song and you relate to that song, and you're like, okay, and it can be influential to you in that way. And young people also use it to connect with each other. It's, again, like I was talking about with my best friend, one of my best friends who I've known for like those 20 years. Music is one of those things that always kept us together. We like the same artists. Music is a big part of how youth connect to each other. And again, this is really important because these mental health themes are becoming increasingly popular in this music. And we're only starting to understand the consequences of what all this exposure, what all this listening to songs with these messages really has. And we have to find a way to help those in need. It's clear that we're in the middle of a mental health crisis and a mental health epidemic. So we need to be paying attention to this. And that's why I really think, I mean, everyone likes to think their work matters. This is why I think my work matters. And the question I get asked, kind of starting to tie all this together, is, is this a good or a bad thing? That's what I get asked often. So there's some evidence for good. It appears that these songs could help with creating less mental health stigma, could be opening up these discussions, especially among young men and young men of color who are really not historically very open to having these conversations. This more and more open discussion from these big artists can really help with that. And it could potentially, as with my friend, encourage kind of help seeking. It's helping young people realize they're struggling with this, but also helping them look up like, hey, I can do something about this. But it's important to note, there is bad. There's potential that there's starting to be studies that, all this talk about mental health from these celebrities and stuff is starting to make young people romanticize and think like, oh, being depressed is cool. Being depressed is awesome. Like I can be just like my role models. So, I mean, that's obviously very bad. And also copycat behavior, young people wanting to be depressed, or unfortunately, maybe taking their own lives in some cases. It could be that bad. There's very important potential for bad. So when we get to the final verdict, when people are like, well, is this good or bad? We don't know yet. I'm trying to do research to kind of get to the bottom of this. I tend to look at it through a positive lens. I try to focus on the good. Clearly, I have not been looking at how much these young people are romanticizing mental health or engaging in or doing these copycat behaviors. That's things I plan to look into in my future research, but I'm an optimist with this. I'm kind of hopeful that it's good. So we don't know yet. And it's likely both. Just like everything in life, it's not an absolutist thing. There's going to be both good and bad for sure. So what does this mean to you? So Phil told me there are going to be potentially some artists listening, some music industry people, and just some fans. So I just thought, what does everything I've told you end up meaning to you? If you're an artist, vulnerability is accepted and it's pretty popular. So songs with mental health themes are common and very relatable. So if this is something you're struggling with, you don't necessarily, I think we're clearly already seeing this trend that more and more young people and young artists are feeling very open about talking about this. But it's just a reminder that it's like, yes, not only are these songs being talked about, but my study looked at the most popular rap songs in the United States, not just rap songs. So it's like these songs are topping the charts. Young people who are clearly struggling with mental health right now, we're in this mental health crisis, they find a lot of relatability in here. So vulnerability is accepted and popular, but at the same time, be thoughtful. Be true to yourself. Don't glamorize these difficulties. Having a mental health difficulty, I can speak from my own experience. And again, I know generalized anxiety disorder is different from bipolar disorder, which is different from major depressive disorder. They're all different, but they aren't a special power. I can say that, working in LA and struggling with my mental health, there were times I hoped that it gave me some special powers and helped me tap into something, and tapping into your emotions is really helpful, but struggling with your mental health is not a special power. Get help if you need it. If you're in the industry, take care. Again, I'm doing something in Canada, so I had to do some sort of Drake shout out. So that's my favorite Drake album. But take care. Artists and fans are really suffering right now. So use this as an opportunity to promote positive attitudes and behaviors. If you have artists who are struggling, and they're talking about in their music, do it in a thoughtful way. This is not something to exploit. If there's a music industry person here watching this, I feel like I'm afraid that this could be exploited if it's not being already, and that certainly frightens me. But I think there's a lot of hope here too, that if promoted responsibly, and what I mean by responsibly is if you're going to promote a song where an artist is struggling with depression and you want to be a part of the good side on this, promote it in a way where it's like, they play the song and it's like, hey, that song was about depression. If you're struggling with depression, you can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Be thoughtful about it. That's there's not simple fixes here, but if we can think critically and try to be on the right side, that can be great. And so if you're a fan, just know, this was really important to me when I was young. If you're struggling with your mental health, you are not alone. It's okay not to be okay. And many others, including very famous and successful artists, and I think that's why the role model thing works, they understand you and you can get support. You are not alone in this, but be thoughtful. Don't idolize mental health difficulties. That is not what makes these artists special. That is like the fact that they feel these emotions and convey them in a way with their talent and their artistry and their authenticity. That's what really matters. But the fact that they have these things is not what makes them special. So ultimately, my hope is that, again, this is just the idea. This is like my, I always forget the word. This is a thing I care about. And there's a cool phrase for it, and I always forget it when I need it. But I firmly believe that celebrity music artists would be really powerful mental health advocates that would be effective in helping to reverse the mental health epidemic among youth. Young people trust and listen to their favorite musicians in a way that they really don't listen to anyone else. We spend a lot of time listening to our favorite artists, and it's a lot of intimate time, and we listen to them and we feel understood by them. It's a very different relationship than we share with sometimes even our parents or our peers. It's a really intimate relationship when you really care about an artist, especially one who's struggling with their mental health. So I like to end on this, that given all this, it's on us, researchers, practitioners, like the people who are helping to design mental health campaigns or people, working at these places. It's on us to realize that this thing is happening, that this discussion in popular rap music is happening, and music at large, I would assume as well. It's on us to realize it, and music industry people as well, to study it. Again, that's, I guess, a little bit more on us, but if you're here, you're kind of studying this a little bit.
Thank you very much, Alex. It begs several questions, and I will suggest to those in the chat that if they want to post something, I'll certainly share it with Alex. But thank you so much for a great presentation. Lots to chew on. And
Sure.
My first question is, is rap leading the way in terms of the open mental health discussion? And if it's not, how do you compare what's going on in rap music these days, starting with Kanye, as you said, with the 808 album, to where we are 2018 when you completed the study?
For sure. So I think that it's important to note that it's like discussion of mental health or alluding to mental health difficulties is not new to music. What's new is that it's in popular music, but you can go back to the 1920s in the United States with the blues and stuff, and that was very depressed music and stuff. So what's different now is that popular music is where this conversation is really starting to occur in these most popular songs in the US. And I think that it's kind of, I don't like to say inarguable, but in this past decade, rap was the genre. That was what everyone chased. And you could go back to history. Rock can be traced back to, Black and African American roots. There's a lot of history in terms of just Black culture leading in a lot of cultural discussions and being, fed off of and being, idolized in a lot of ways, and good and bad. And I think that rap has really led this conversation. And I think we're seeing with this mental health epidemic now, we're seeing that, since rap music's at the front, other genres are talking about this as well, very openly. But rap is like the zeitgeist. It's where everything is happening. So I do think rap is really kind of at the forefront of it. I think it would be irresponsible to not say that it's not also happening in other, in TV. There's some, 13 Reasons Why on Netflix, which was a really popular show about a young person who takes their own life. There are a lot of other things happening too, but I think, again, it's my belief that these are some of the most powerful and influential people in the world, not just the United States, and certainly in Canada as well. And, Drake, made a career out of being vulnerable. So I think rap is really kind of at the forefront of it for sure.
Now, you also talked about, the empathy that it leads to. Hearing your favorite artist, articulate, in very creative ways how they are feeling and what they're dealing with. What are you finding that those people in the academic community, perhaps, and those in the mental health community, for lack of a better word, are they taking advantage of this moment to really help destigmatize the whole mental health issue? What's being done?
So that's a really great question. And I would not have been able to answer this question as well before I had my PhD exams, where I had to really look at this stuff. And historically, there has not been a lot of mental health campaign work necessarily. There have been mental health campaigns, but they haven't been really scientifically studied or informed. And that's been problematic because research is showing now, especially among people with I'm trying to think of the easiest way to say it, the highest levels of depression. You could put out like an anti-stigma campaign that would work on most people, right? But someone with depression, depression is a condition of negative thinking, of, you can have kind of thinking errors and stuff. And people who are depressed can hear these anti-stigma messages done in these campaigns that have been done before and feel even worse about themselves because they aren't processing things in the same way. So I think that in the past 10 years, there has started to be way more research on mental health messaging, looking into how do we get to increase this empathy as you're talking about. It's a really great question. And what research has shown is that empathy is a really, really critical way to get people to understand a condition or even seek help. Because especially with a stigmatized condition, something that people really try to not talk about, something like mental health, empathy really can be a key. So research has certainly been tapping into this even more so in the last decade. There's been research and wonderful things done in different ways for different stigmatized health conditions. I think of HIV and AIDS. There's been plenty of research on that dating back to the 80s and 90s. But with mental health and stuff, it's really these last 10 years where we're just really starting to see the machine start cranking and really starting to look at this scientifically and trying to figure out how to create more empathy. So it's starting, but it's where people are really looking and pointing as this is an important thing, but we aren't where we want to be yet. And it's just that more work needs to be done.
So you're at the forefront clearly, and bringing music and mental health together as part of a linked discussion. I wanted to do a little bit more research prior to you coming in to see, where are the scientists going with this? Because finally you do get, some of the most influential people. I know you describe rap artists as being some of the coolest people in the world. So they're giving you a gift.
Yes.
If you're in the scientific community,
yes, absolutely.
They're giving you a gift to say the door is now open for different kinds of conversations. And what are your academic peers saying about this? What's science doing with this?
For sure. So that's the exciting part where, again, it's all new and it's not due to lack of trying. There are a million great scientists doing a lot of great work, but no one had looked at uniquely this. And again, I feel like I was just uniquely positioned as a producer in Los Angeles, noticing this thing happening. This diehard rap fan for a long time, I noticed this thing was happening. So you are absolutely right. I see this as a huge gift. Like these are, these can be some of the most powerful and wonderful mental health advocates. It's important to acknowledge that I think that, again, Kanye is my favorite artist. I think his discussion of mental health is largely irresponsible. I think it can be actually kind of bad in a lot of ways. I remember him saying in an interview that he doesn't go to therapy because he talks to his family and friends. And I'm like, I understand not everyone has access to therapy. That's its own conversation. But Kanye can afford it. That's not his issue. And it's just like, he can be like, it's important to acknowledge that these people are giving us a gift. Absolutely. It's an absolute gift. But there still needs to be consideration about how these people, any artist, rap artist, pop artist, any celebrity, are talking about mental health, because they can push things in the wrong direction too. They can lead people to romanticize about it or to think it has these other things. So it's an absolute gift what's going on now. So I think I feel like we're just really scratching the surface here, and I'm hopeful that my research can get more and more people excited. What was most exciting to me was this study, the first one on the rap lyrics, getting published in JAMA Pediatrics. That's like a super, for lack of a better term, it's like a super sciencey journal. Like it's, doctors and physicians and all these people who read it. And they're like, them seeing it and being like, hey, we want it in this journal. It's like, they see it as this really meaningful thing. This is a very competitive journal where they reject, a lot of stuff. And this, again, I'm so thankful for it. It's like this found its way through. And it's like, I think there's starting to be a recognition that, hey, are we paying attention? Like you're saying, it's like a great question. It's like, are we paying attention to this gift right here? It's like, hello. I'm like waving at everyone. It's like, there's this huge thing happening. Hello. And like, I see how it's affecting people. Can we like pay attention, please? So yeah, it's a gift. But I think we're just at the start. There's plenty of research on how we can start moving forward with this and start thinking about messaging and stuff, but showing that it's happening scientifically is really the first step. And now just starting, there's going to be so much work that needs to be done, but I'm really excited to do it. And I hope, I've talked to some other wonderful people who've seen my study and stuff, really smart scientists and researchers and stuff, and they seem to be excited too. So I'm certainly optimistic.
A couple of things that I want to follow up on. Here in Canada, I don't think we pay enough attention to how young people are dealing with mental health challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know what the comparison is in the States, but I also know that young people aren't going to be putting their hands up to go speak to a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And so music becomes this other way to try and cope with what they're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the other issue, which I've always heard of. I don't know how true it is, but I'm going to put it out there. You are now the PhD person sitting in front of us.
PhD student. Don't have my PhD
student sitting in front of us. You don't want to rush it. I get that.
No jinxing it.
But people now talk about music therapy,
mm-hmm.
As something that's worth taking a look at.
Mm-hmm.
There's another professor, you might know about this professor, who has written about the fact that hip hop heals.
Mm-hmm. Was that Don Elegant?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
The notion that, it's art-based therapy cannot be ignored.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some very meaningful things that come out of that. What are you learning about that area of research? Has it been taken seriously enough?
So I can say for the US, it's similar to Canada, where we're doing very poorly on mental health in general. I mean, you can look at the trends and know that even if we were doing well, maybe it would still be a problem, but we're doing particularly poorly as well. To answer your question on kind of the value of music therapy and art therapy, it's unquestionable that those have a very unique way. Again, young people in particular, but pretty much most people, not everyone, has a very unique relationship with music, a very special relationship with an artist or something, and they find themselves in music. And so I'm not an expert. I've read, I've cited Don Elligan before, and there's I can't remember his first name. His last name is Travis, who's done hip hop therapy. And there are these ways that people won't feel comfortable, just like these artists saying, I have anxiety or I have depression, but they'll find themselves in these songs and they could write their own raps, or they could just say, hey, these lyrics describe what I'm going through. And it helps people to process things in therapy. But you are right. There's still certainly, there are many mental health industry issues here, and there aren't a lot of people raising their hands to get therapy. And that's kind of where I would like this to go. But I think a more, not more meaningful, but a more crucial juncture at this point is to just get people to realizing that they can talk about it, that they can reach out to peers. So with young people in particular, I think I saw there's this really cool campaign that just started here now called, not now, but in the last year or so, called Seize the Awkward, where it's encouraging young people to open up conversations with their friends who they think might be struggling with their mental health. And they say 76% of young people, the first person they go to when they're struggling with their mental health is like a peer, a close friend or something. So I think that more so, it's important to start raising these levels of mental health literacy, having young people understand. It's when you're a teenager, typically is like the first time you experience what depression is. And, you got your hormones going crazy. Life is just, it's really hard. We all remember being teenagers. It's a really hard and complicated time. And so I think that I want to get people going into therapy, but there are other routes too. I think that J. Cole is a wonderful mental health advocate. He performed at the BET Awards, I think 2 years ago, where he performed his song Friends, where he advocates for just meditation. And he had a bunch of young Black and African-American men and women on stage with him, meditating with him. And it's like, there are other things other than just therapy. Therapy is the best one, but again, there are issues there. But we can get into self-care and just opening up and not feeling like you have to hold everything in. Just talking can be therapeutic. And like you're saying with Dr. Elligan's work and stuff, group therapy can be great. Art therapy can be great. There's a lot of different things. And I think we're just like, I'm like just hoping, like, it's almost like a boulder on a hill. It's like, I'm just trying to get it pushed. It's like just a little more empathy, just a little more understanding. And then like, that's where I want to go. My research is going to look at using these artists to encourage people to seek help in some way, or at least to talk to others, because I think that's that first step.
Now, I have another question. The whole question of stigma that's associated with mental health. Did you find in your study that people didn't want to use the word mental health, but wanted to talk more about wellness, mental wellness?
So that's a really great question. That's something I've personally struggled with myself. I'm not sure if you're paying attention to it. I don't think I've ever written in the paper mental illness, because I think that puts it, I think we all have, it's kind of like, I think of it like with dogs and a pit bull. We have this idea that it's like this dog is violent or whatever. And we have that, I think, with this term mentally ill. It's like these people are violent. These people are crazy. We use this kind of ableist terms and stuff. And I think mental wellness is probably a great way to go. I was like, my mom was actually the one who pushed me. She has a PhD in developmental psychology. And she was like, you don't need to call it mental illness. It's like, yes, it is an illness to the extent that it's something you can't control, but it's just mental health. It can be good. You can be doing great one day and not doing great the next day. It's not as similar, calling it an illness. It's not the flu. You don't go to the doctor and get therapy and then you're done. It's like, I'll hear that sometimes from people like, yeah, no, I'm good on therapy. I'm done. I'm fixed. It's like, okay, you are for now, but there's probably other things going on too. And that's okay. And that's great. I'm glad you're feeling better, but it's not an illness. I think mental wellness is a great way to put it, but just, you're right. Even using those terms to kind of change the stigma, or just like, I'm taking a mental health day. There's certainly much more kind of conversation around that. And I think it's just normalizing it. It's like, the way I think about when I talk to my young friends who are struggling, like myself before, with depression or something. If you saw someone walking down the street and they had a broken arm, you'd be like, what is it? Like, ew, like go to the doctor, get that fixed. I think of like depression or, any of these kind of mental health conditions. Again, bipolar is different, but kind of these more, neuroses like depression, kind of these ones that, major depressive disorder is different, but in general, these kind of come and go. If you saw if you saw someone walking down the street with a broken arm, you'd be like, ew, go to the doctor. And like, having depression temporarily is like, it's a broken arm in your brain. It's like, what are you doing? Are you depressed? It's like, go to therapy, go, get this fixed. So I'm hopeful that, the way we're using language can hopefully help to reduce that stigma. And I think that's where this music is making a big difference. Because if nothing else, people are a little more comfortable talking about it, if not always in the most comfortable terms.
And where does the conversation about self-care start? Because that's also another way to get at this, right?
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. I think that's where it starts is, again, I dream of like a PSA with J. Cole or, who's, Lil Baby or DaBaby, like any of these really contemporary artists just saying like, hey, you can take care of yourself too. You can meditate or just like, prioritize your mental health. Go do something you like. It's like, but it has to be intentional. That's the hard part with it. Like saying, take care of yourself. It's like, cool, thanks. Like someone's telling me, it's like, cool, I appreciate that, thanks. But it's like, it'll be important when we advocate for something like that to give actionable steps, not just be like, okay, make sure you're good to yourself. It's like, that doesn't, especially if someone who's depressed, it's like, like, all right, whatever, So I think that self-care plays a huge role in this. So I've been trying actually and working on my dissertation. I'm trying to think of ways that I can try to incorporate that and kind of talking about that and ways to promote that in a helpful, actionable way as part of my work. But yeah, it's self-care is the easiest one to do. It's generally free.
Generally free. And I remember you mentioned, an artist who performed at some award show and gave out the number for
Logic. Yeah, Logic. Yep. So he had the song one. So the name of the song, he doesn't even say the number in the song. It's not like in the chorus or anything. The name of the song is 1-800-273-8255, which is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline in the U.S. And it was a huge song here. I think it's gone like 5 times platinum. Like, it was near the top of the Billboard charts. And he performed it at an award show. And I did this study in one of my classes. I can't fit everything in this presentation, but we looked at how often people were tweeting out the full number after he went on these award shows. And many people were. One of the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline said, I think after he performed at the MTV Awards or the Grammys, they received like a record number of calls. It's like, it like boomed up and stuff because it's creating this awareness. I'm not sure everyone calling it that night was someone with depression, but if we're getting some of those people to do it in the right way, that's awesome. And just getting more people to know that number. So if they're in a moment of crisis, it's there.
Yes. And is the system ready to cope with, this new higher level of awareness? And what do you do with it? As you pointed out, when you talk about self-care, it can range from any number of, steps you can take to deal with, whatever might be, a pain point at the moment, right? Mm-hmm. To, sitting down with a therapist and working through those issues.
Yeah, I'm truthfully speaking, I have not done much research into knowing if the system's ready. I think, but with something like these national suicide prevention lifelines and stuff, again, the spikes aren't going to be great, but they're, it seems like from the outside that it's like they're well funded, they're well advertised. I would like to think at least something like these crisis intervention points, those are good. I would like to think those are ready for it, but truthfully speaking, I'm not sure that's something I'm going to need to look into because that's going to be an important conversation we need to have as a country in general.
Well, you certainly have your work cut out for you.
Yes, I do.
Alex, in this area. Now, let me ask you, rap is leading the way with this, but on a personal level, where do you want to see this go?
That's such a great question. So my dream is to be able to get like $1 million grant from like the FDA or the National Institute of Health. I think I saw my brother's in here watching and he works for them. So if he has $1 million check, but getting money in some way, like a grant, to be able to create like a national campaign to use these artists who are so influential and to make sure we're messaging responsibly, because I'm just like, man, like you're saying, it's a gift. It just seems so obvious. I'm like, again, I feel like I'm waving my hands like, hello, like, are you guys? And I think it's because I think part of it is just in academia, like you get older and you care, like there's research that shows just like when you're between 17 and 24 tends to be like when you have the most meaningful music of your life. And some, a little bit before, some a little bit after, but that's like the most important music. So I think by the time a lot of people are getting PhDs and stuff, they don't, it's maybe something they aren't as passionate about. And I think that the path that I'm taking was paved by many great scholars before me who were doing research that like set up the dominoes so I could get here. And it's like, maybe if I would have arrived 5 years sooner, I would be doing something completely different. So my dream is to be able to run one of those big campaigns, collaborate with some of these artists, have them be a part of the messaging. And I think it would be, to me, it just seems like the most obvious thing ever. Like, I just think it would be so meaningful to see these role models advocating and being openly vulnerable and courageous. Because again, as I said before, it's like, these are they're just seen as such role models and they're so influential and they can't fix everything, but man, it's like, it seems like it's already starting to trend in some good ways in general. So if we can, it's almost like a runaway horse a little bit. It's like we can grab the reins a little bit and make sure it steers in the right direction. We can do something really special.
And I've been thinking about 808 references that you spoke about in your presentation. Clearly, Kanye was an important moment in time, right? In terms of publicly expressing what was going on internally in terms of his world. Clearly, he's had an influence, but where are we now? Are we more or less seeing a replication of that moment when he dropped that album? Have we, is there progress?
I think there is. Yeah, I think there is. That's a really good question. I think there is because, again, when we looked at the most popular songs in 2018, like which was the last year we did the study in like spring of 2019. The biggest artists in that year, it was like Drake, Juice WRLD, Post Malone, XXXTentacion. I'm forgetting one other, it just bugs me. But they all, like at different points, cited 808s and Heartbreak as being influential. So I think we're just seeing, as I'm kind of said in the presentation, I think we're seeing just the creative kind of offspring of what that musical moment was and how important that was to a lot of people. So we're seeing it, but it's important now because Kanye's getting older now and he's still an incredibly influential figure. But now to young people, Kanye's a billionaire now, right? Like young people don't relate to a billionaire as much. They aspire to be like him in some way. So there's some influence there. But I think they turn to those artists like the examples, Lil Baby and Da Baby. And I don't think there are any other baby names I need to remember right now. But they're turning to these artists who are just fantastic artists. And they're the ones kind of carrying the torch in this way. And Juice WRLD, what's really sad is I'm talking about Juice WRLD and XXXTentacion. They both passed away. They both died separately in these last couple of years. There's Mac Miller's another artist who passed away. Lil Peep. It's really sad what's kind of happening. We're seeing it with artists too. And I guess to get back to your point, I think we are seeing the creative offspring of what he started, but it matters more because now it's young people, and young people listen to other young people more than they listen to someone their parents' age.
Last thing I would ask is, and you've worked at one of the big labels. I happen to know Gabe. I dealt with Gabe when I was publishing Word Magazine.
Gabe Tesoriero?
That's right.
That's Kanye's publicist right there. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, I was an intern. I worked with him a little bit. That's really cool.
Yeah, I remember that somewhere from the research I did, and he's still there at Universal, right?
Yeah, I think so. And he's killing it. It's really, he was a really nice guy to me. So he got me my first meeting with Lenny S., who I had that picture with later. He was the one who helped me put that together. So I'll always be thankful for Gabe.
Yes. Now you obviously did your time there, and
that's a perfect way to put it. Thank you. Did my time. Now I'm not doing it. I was like, I'm happy to not be in that prison anymore.
You did your time, and now you're on the other side.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering whether in this moment, in this woke moment, let's call it that, as a result of this global civil rights movement called the BLM protests from last summer. 26 million people participated in that, we're told by the New York Times. I'm just wondering if it isn't in the best interest of the record industry to pick up the phone and say, hey, Kresovich, we want you to do this public service campaign with all these artists. Is that too far-fetched?
I hope not. That's definitely a dream I have. You know, I for a long time I hoped a record label would call me, and that would not be the call I dreamed of. But that would be the dream come true. And I was thinking about that because I think it already is this moment. And I certainly wouldn't be comfortable doing the work by myself. I'd be like pulling in mental health messaging people and all this stuff. There are people way smarter than me in a lot of these different things. But that is the dream. I think it would be, if there are any record executives watching this or watching this in the future, I'm not hard to find. You can find my email pretty easily. You found me, Phil, so I'm thankful for that. So that would be the dream, and I would like to think that that's something that we're getting closer to. I know Billie Eilish and Amine and Miley Ray Cyrus's younger sister. I think I can't remember her name now, unfortunately. But they all participated in that Seize the Awkward campaign. So it's starting to look like there's going to be some crossover here. But I'm just like, man, we got to do this. It's like and I'm not sure. I'm definitely not ready to handle anything like this myself yet. A lot of research needs to be done, and I need to work with many, many other really smart people studying, very different aspects of this stuff. But we're close. We're really close, and maybe other people are ready to run with it. I'm happy to take that call and give me money to get a team.
You certainly have worked both sides of the fence.
Sure.
So I think you'd be highly credible
Sure.
making that message. And, I'm just real happy that you took the time to have this conversation with us, Alex. It's been really amazing. I find it really fascinating. I know that, scientists, medical health experts on both sides are grappling with it. I know, for instance, as I mentioned to you prior to us going online, that there is a scientist working at Canadian CAMH, an organization dealing with addiction and mental health issues. They have been trying to raise awareness, and I think that's the first step, right? Mm-hmm. Raising awareness to the epidemic proportion that we're seeing right now, which clearly has accelerated due to the pandemic.
Absolutely.
Right? Yep. People are now referring to that as an epidemic all on its own.
Sure.
So hopefully there will be, this understanding that we got to move on this. Otherwise, young people lose years off their lives when they have to take time out. The stigma attached with talking about it, and all those kinds of things. So, you're doing great work. And I really appreciate you taking the time with us today to share your research and to talk about it. And I look forward to you becoming Dr. Alex Kresovich.
Yes, hopefully in a couple of weeks.
When are you looking to complete your work there?
May 2022. So mark that on your calendar as the day that I can start getting paid like a normal human being again instead of as a grad student.
All right. So we're going to keep in touch. We're going to stay in touch because this is really fertile area for more research. And we really thank you for sharing this with us and our audience. We're going to have it on YouTube for those who may have missed parts of this. If you want to share that information with your friends, tell them this conversation has been recorded and it will be online. And what a great way to end 2 weeks of this conference, talking to you, sharing your research and your insights. And we thank you very, very much for taking the time.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I really appreciate it. I think an important thing in science is I appreciate you giving me this platform to talk and, to talk to people who aren't just other scientists about this, to continue to open up this conversation. So I'm very thankful to you and Donna and everyone involved in this for, reaching out to me and giving me this opportunity. So thank you very much.
Thank you again. And once again, guys, for those who are watching, I do have to acknowledge the support of Factor, the Canadian Heritage, the Department of Canadian Heritage, for sponsoring this event, and also the Irie Music Festival's crew, This has been a great 2 weeks, lots of interesting discussion, conversation, and insights from a whole slew of people. So I hope you'll allow me to thank everybody who participated in this. And again, we hope that you got something from this talk and the previous ones. If you've missed anything, do go to our website at sagamusicfest.com, and we'll be posting all of these panels and keynotes for your appreciation. And again, good time to say goodbye. Alex, please take care of yourself, stay safe,
Will do.
and we'll try and double back May 2022. All right.
Sounds great to me. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
All right. Have a great day.
All right, you too.
Bye bye.